Can you do a comparison from best and cheapest orchestral libraries, for example Amadeus Symphonic versus Gary Tan Personal, or more expensive libraries?
Maybe. There aren't that many cheap all-in-one orchestral packages to make comparisons with, but I suppose I could cover stuff like Albion and Metropolis Arcade and so on. When it comes to complete orchestral sets like Cinesymphony and Spitfire's Air Studios collection, I've only got bits and pieces, so I'd have to buy more from each set before I do a full comparison.
How can we get over the epic sound fashion, and all the cinematic music sounds the same? When do we start integrate the intelligent jazz theories from the last 70 years, and get rid of the Hans Zimmer wannabe syndrome?
That's an interesting question. Even Hans Zimmer wants to be Hans Zimmer these days. The truth is we can't get rid of this type of content. There will always be a market for it because of mainstream audiences. This kind of advert fashion music has been around for decades. The funny thing is, we're hearing more of it now because sample libraries have made it easier to make. Many composers like yourself yearn for more thoughtful and creative music. The truth is, that music hasn't died out, it's just become surrounded by trailer cues. If we want to hear more independent creative stuff, we need to start taking our time to make that music we want to hear and to put it out there on Bandcamp, SoundCloud, YouTube, whatever. Us composers need to contribute before we start to see the creativity come to the foreground again and become more in demand by those who hear it. Making trailer music may make some of us money, but it's not who we are. We need to make that known.
What are your methods to make orchestral libraries sound more realistic? What do you usually automate and how? For example, in the Afflatus Chapter 1 strings library. Thank you.
I don't really use automation apart from using the mod wheel and volume slider. The truth is, I get the most amount of realism from my libraries by studying how different musicians play their instruments, and then I emulate that on the keyboard. I always play my parts live, whether it's drums, percussion, strings, brass, whatever. It takes practice, but if you put the work in, you'll get a much more realistic and human result.
First, thank you for doing all this. Very informative and useful. Request, talk about the creative process in terms of what is possible when it comes to the different orchestral parts. For example, I was admiring what the woodwinds could do while you were reviewing the latest Spitfire Studio woodwinds. All the figures you have created there and explored sounded so nice. How do you take those and then connect them together to create a piece? Thank you.
I am planning on a video series covering orchestration with different sections and creative ways to layer and compose with them, so you'll have to wait for that one.
How do you come up with melodies for strings and piano?
I picture the lead melody being a voice, and I hum the notes while playing around. If I feel it could be sung by a person, then I know it's right.
Okay, I've got a few. Do you plan on making more videos, like the Composing with Motivation? I love the concept and the fact that someone was talking about how to create music, rather than what tools to use.
Yes, I've been planning more Composing with Motivation videos, and it's been a pain in the butt because I'm trying to come up with something that's entertaining and informative without being boring, and I've rewritten this stuff over and over and over again. I will get through it though.
Have you heard of the developer Light and Sound? Their chamber strings sound very nice and are 60% off at the moment.
I've been contemplating getting that library, but I just haven't made the move yet. Maybe one day.
What's your favorite color?
Purple.
How do you go about budgeting in order to regularly purchase sample libraries?
Well, I'm always broke. I don't get much money, and after I've taken care of food and other necessities, it's a case of scrounging up what I can to get some cheap libraries or save for a more expensive one. That's why you'll notice my channel goes dark for a while sometimes.
Omnisphere sound design video.
Every time I try to create something in Omnisphere, I get overwhelmed with all the choices I have. Plus, the patches in Omnisphere are so good, I feel like I can't add anything to it. Perhaps someday.
I'd love if you could do a video that explores the concept of adding unusual/unexpected instruments into songs to make really quirky tracks. Also explanation videos of composing.
That's certainly doable. I could cover a tasteful usage of eccentric sounds and which libraries to use to get those sounds, so yeah, I may just do a video on that.
Here's a question then. You know Spitfire's Evogrid technology. How would you personally go about recreating that on separate tracks in your DAW to make a soundscape that constantly evolves over time in an interesting way?
Two main ways to get that effect. Use an arpeggiator either for short notes or long notes and set the scale or melody you'd like them to be in. Then change the speed and note duration across multiple instances of arpeggios, all with slight variations on the scale. Then add an LFO that controls volume, or a tremolo, to each of those tracks with different speeds and depths for each track. Then sit back and record.
If you could relearn how to play parts, whether it's drums, percussion, strings, etc., On a MIDI keyboard, how would you approach it?
I will be doing a video series on how to translate different instrument performances to the keyboard at some point. Overall, it requires research, observation of live performances, and practice, practice, practice.
What is your go-to tool all the time for orchestral music, and what do you recommend? Such as compressors, limiters, sidechaining, reverb, echoes. Where's your order of usage?
I don't generally do too much mixing on my own stuff, but I do like to use Valhalla Room Reverb on an FX bus. When it comes to EQ and compression for orchestral stuff, I prefer soft compressors like Native Instruments and Softube's Varicomp, mainly because orchestral music should, not always, but should have a very large dynamic range. Then a touch of broad EQ with Soundtoys SciQ. That usually helps.
Hi, and thank you for doing this. So this is a two-parter, part 1, with the very many libraries you have reviewed. Is there one library that you have, or would like to get your hands on, that you have not reviewed yet, and why?
Maybe Berlin Woodwinds Revive? I don't have the funds to drop on sample providers who specialize in elite pricing, so I wouldn't mind getting some free stuff from Orchestral Tools. So, yeah.
Part 2, if you had to pick one library of each instrument family to cover the entire orchestra, what would they be and why? I know this is a lot to ask, lol, but would be good for us to know what your personal favorites are. Thanks.
If I were forced to pick from what's available right now, Cinematic Studio Strings, Cinematic Studio Brass, Spitfire Studio Woodwinds, LA Drama Drums, and the Hammersmith. And that would be for solely orchestral stuff.
How did you get started with music?
I learned how to play Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on a Yamaha Portatone when I was 2. Other than that, I don't read musical notation. I can read the rhythmic portion of it, so I go completely by ear. Yeah.
What is the difference between a duck?
When referring to between a person or an animal, the common meaning is between the legs. So you would take a duck, measure the distance between its right and left leg, then you've got your answer. Hang on a second. Aren't you one of my 2 Patreon supporters?
First, a mega thank you and appreciation for your reviews, straightforward and honest, and also for the additional instrument and Kai patches. From your experience this far, what have you found in Kontakt 6 that are significant advances on 5?
There's more robust effects in 6, but they used heaps of CPU. 6 also has wavetable synthesis or something like that.
Are you into sound design?
Yes.
How about some FX reviews?
I've thought about it, not sure about it yet.
Do you have a favorite orchestral FX chain?
Just the compressor and EQ I mentioned earlier.
Are you an all-in-one isotope ozone guy, or do you prefer individual effects?
I like different effects from Softube, Soundtoys, Audio Thing, etc. Whatever works, really.
What is your studio setup?
It's a bed drawer being used as a table in my kitchen and a 7-year-old PC.
Hi, Corey. Would like your opinion on Vienna's Epic Orchestra 2.0. I already have it, but you may have some great tips as usual to utilize this orchestra to its fullest. You always make superb and easy to follow videos. Great work, M8. Cheers.
I've never really used anything from VSL, so I really don't know. And now for the anonymous emails.
How do you have the money to buy all the great libraries you review? I've got a small fraction of what you do, and I think I already must have spent like 2K just on libraries, and you seem to have much more.
Like I mentioned earlier, I basically forfeit having a life so I can do this.
How do you find the strings in Jaeger vs. Spitfire Symphony Essentials on similar articulations?
I haven't used Symphony Essentials, but I do like the discipline of Jaeger's strings.
How do you find the strings in Palette Sketchpad? Do you think they made a good or a bad choice to make them so dry?
I find they're a little too clean sounding, which adds to that synthetic tone.
I rather enjoy the sounds of East West Hollywood strings sometimes, but then I also feel that the recordings have a lot of noise, which combined with the feeling that the Play engine is less stable than the Kontakt engine, I tend to stay away from them. Do you share any of the above feelings?
Hollywood Strings does have a little noise in it, mainly when you hold down the sustain pedal while playing shorts. The tail ends have ambient noise. What I like most about Hollywood Strings is the variety of short notes.
Despite having probably all I need, I find myself lusting after something by Orchestral Tools. I was considering maybe Inspire 2. Do you think that captures a bit of the Orchestral Tools professionalism I hear about, or should I not stress? And what I have already has everything and I'll just be disappointed.
If you feel you have enough, don't spend any more money. Wait until a moment pops up where you feel you really need something different, then make a purchase. Words I don't live by, unfortunately.
What are your top 3 songs that you have ever composed?
I'd probably say Ita, The Girl with No Kidneys and Two Hearts, and Souls of Serenity. I'll link them in the description.
Did you ever use Rapid Composer?
I've never actually heard of Rapid Composer.
Cubase vs. Reaper, what do you think?
Reaper.
What's the largest number of instruments you've ever used in a single song?
About 172, because of this album. This is all one song.
Max actually used RAM.
12 gigs and then the blue screen.
How come you've got all this kindness to do all this?
Because if I can be kind and I have the means to be kind, I should be kind by all means. I treat others how I want to be treated.
If you tried to compose something with Contact Factory Library, would you find any orchestral instruments worth using in there?
I'd say the brass sustains and the celeste. I've used them in past songs.
I'm very tempted by palette melodics. What's your favorite instrument in there?
And the woodwinds sound good in palette melodics for what it's worth.
Would you have any advice on the mechanics, or the ideology of using CCs to enhance a song? Say you had all the chord progression, and all the notes laid down, how would you go about adding that? What would you think about? Is it all intuition, or could one somehow think about it, like say brass goes into high CC/mod wheel, add A, ends of notes B, ends of phrases D, on the 1 and the 5 chords? From a workflow thing, say I use Cubase, would I start recording on top of the old notes, and have the CCs on an overlaying track, or somehow separate? If it's on top, I'd end up grabbing it versus notes, should I do it on separate tracks, and somehow route the CC January 11th, 1921 / into the same? Any advice is appreciated.
I honestly don't understand this question, but I do like CCs.
What color does the number 2 taste like?
Light red.
Who killed JFK?
The Colombians.
Why do farts smell worse when you do them in the shower?
The heat and moisture trap the molecules and stick to the inside of the nostrils.
What is the worst possible way to die?
Living without purpose.
What shape is the sky?
Spherical.
What came first, the color orange or the fruit?
The fruit was there first, but the French complicated the situation. And that's that. Yeah. So, thanks for sending in your questions. Fun to answer them, and who knows, maybe we can do this again some other time. For now, whippersnipper. For now, check you later.